user story mapping, what is it? There's some official definition. My own definition is it's a flowchart that visually describes how a user moves through an experience. Um, and so we were actually going to do an exercise here. That's why this picture. Um, I assume you can still see my screen. So we're going to skip the exercise a little bit, and I was doing this for practice yesterday. And so we're just going to see that. So I picked something really, really simple, which is like, what's an email flow? Um, the user logs in, signs up for an email. Like, let's say I want to send an email to someone. I sign up, log in, maybe I compose a new email, I send it, and the other person gets it. This is kind of the sequence that happens in order for me as a user to be successful. And these are kind of, some of the things that I need to do as I log in, as I sign up. I need to pick a username, a password, log in, maybe enter these things, compose. I have to like think about these kind of things. Um, yeah, so this is a user story map. Essentially, what you do is you try to figure out which user this is for. What are the logical steps that they're going to take through your product to get the kind of job that they want to be done. And then you go right to left, left to right in that way. And then underneath, you just fill in details. And these details, in this case, are just what the user will do. They can also be mocks. They can be kind of integrations that are required. They can be legal compliance kind of considerations. You can put whatever details you want, but the essential idea is the user is doing something, you write down their journey, and then you fill it in with kind of details at the bottom. So that's what a user story map is. That's how you use it. Sorry that we couldn't do that exercise. But let's maybe look at some more examples of user story maps, right? This is one that I did in like 15, 20 minutes with a client. It was really useful because, we figured out, oh, there's a habit loop we need to create. And so that's the riskiest part of our whole thing. So maybe we should worry about that a little bit more than we should worry about other things. So user story maps can be really simple and hand-drawn. This is from the design book again. Here they're trying to model how, clinical trial enrollments happen, which if any of you work in medicine, which you may, it's a really complicated procedure. They managed to break it down into something really, really simple, right? Make appointments, search matches. So you can make it really high level. You can also make it really, really, capturing like a lot of details. So this is from Jeff Patton wrote a book called User Story Mapping and also has a fantastic talk where he talks through the whole book. So this is from that presentation. And so this is the example of a company that had multiple products and they're trying to figure out how they work together. So they can be really complex. They can inform roadmaps. You can take a user story map, split it up into releases, and boom, you have a roadmap. And often you can use jobs to be done. Like the job to be done is what you want at the end of the kind of user story map, right? So that can happen as well. They can be physical. You see the same structure here is what the user is doing across the top, and then details kind of lower down in the flow. So you can add, smaller steps and all this stuff. Yeah, this is a really, really key benefit of user story mapping. They create shared benefits, understanding. So what will happen in a meeting, all right? Or you go to a new client and they throw like tons of documentation at you, and they're like, oh, read this. And maybe sometimes new documentation, we all read it, we're like, oh, okay, they want you saying some words, we all understand the same words, great, we're done, we can go off and do jobs to be done and use story mapping, right? The problem is that we can read the same words and have different images in our head. But really, when you draw them out, as you do in a user story map, you recognize that, oh, there's differences maybe. And then you work together and talk some more, and then you sort it out. And then when you walk away, you have the same idea in your head. So not only the words that we're using are the same, actually the images in our heads are the same. And that's kind of success here. Does it look familiar at all to you? So it's basically a user story map, right? You can use user story maps to talk about user story maps. Recursive tools are awesome. So talk about something, draw it out, talk about it some more, have a shared understanding. The shared understanding is also your job to be done, right? So it's at the end of your flow, and this is how it all works together. Okay, this is a really quick personal example. So this is a client. They didn't have, kind of a good piece of document that I could see and understand their product. And so there's two phases. There's pre-acquisition, post-acquisition. So we're not worrying about pre-acquisition too much, but you can use jobs to be done there as well, which is what Peggy Olson talks about in that video. Post-acquisition, we're like, okay, let's just map out high level what's going on with your product. So we have lines, we have progress, the user ends here, this is some kind of value. I have screenshots. So this gives you a nice overview of really what's going on, even in the absence of any kind of mocks or specs. It just took like half an hour. You can see there's like some weird flows happening here, like why are there two entry points to things? This might be something to consider. Maybe this thing is all about user discovery, like these three things. So you can group them and be like, oh, discovery is where we're having a big problem. So maybe we should focus on that. So this is an example of using a story map really, really quickly. Yeah. So they can be used really quickly. When should you use it? Essentially, when you're trying to understand a product, right? Either it can already exist, or you're trying to make it, in which case it hopefully exists in your stakeholder's head. And so, what does that product look like? What does it feel like? What does the user actually do as they go through this product? When you're trying to create shared understanding between teams, it's absolutely fantastic. If you've ever gone and had like tons of documents thrown at you, like here, like, I want to understand your product. Oh, here's like 10 specs that are out of date and 20 pages long and really badly written, and you just want to cry, right? And now what you do is magic. You just get everybody and like, just tell me about your product. Tell me about, what happens when, okay, so the user first logs in, right? And your product is to like connect people so they can go on a date. Okay, great. That's the last step. So now users logged in. Tell me what happens next. Oh, okay. And then you keep going there. And so it becomes much easier. People will often get a better understanding of their own product doing this exercise than by writing these kind of long product specs and things like that. When you're not sure where to start, just make a user story map. You just get a better idea of the product. People will think you're smart because you have this like cool tool, and it'll actually just give you a map of everything that's going on, and then it becomes much easier for you to figure out where you should go and intervene. How to use it? List users on the one end. So the one thing that we looked about, there's only one user. There could be multiple kind of users, as in the design sprint example. Write the end scenario outcome at the end. So what's the job to be done? Then ask questions like, what happens next? Okay, is that all? Is there anything I missed? And then keep saying the story back to them, right? Like, oh, the user signs up, then they enter this, and then they enter this, and then this thing happens. Say the story again and again, and that way, when you're missing things or doing things wrong, people will correct you. Am I missing anything? Is a great question. Keep it really simple to start. This, like, one of the big judgments you'll have to make when you're doing a user story map interview is to understand where to go deeper into depth and where to keep it simple. I would say just start really simple. Just get like a full story before, and then at the end, you can go to whatever you can. Like I've done like a lot. Like you can go really deep with user story maps. You can put technical things there, like these are the data models that will be affected. These are the API calls we have to make. These are the partnership things we have to think about in order to make this feature work. It's really, really nice. How does it help? Create user empathy throughout your team. Again, a hidden feature of user story maps is that the users are at the very center of them. So the likelihood that you'll build something completely irrelevant to your user becomes less. And again, it's hidden, right? Just in the thing. Gain alignment among stakeholders. Oh, what a Jedi mind trick. All right. You have a bunch of stakeholders. They all have a different idea what the product ought to be. All right. You go in and you ask the stakeholder, what do you want this product to be? Okay. And then as they say it, you write it down. Okay. And then you go to your next stakeholder and they're like, oh, I talked to some people. This is what they said. What do you think? And then as they say it, you write it down. All right. Then you go to the big meeting where all the stakeholders are together. And now everyone has that input into this user story map. Everyone kind of knows what the story is. And magically there's a lot more alignment, there's a lot less pushback. And everyone can really talk about the different things without getting lost in the details, which happens so often in some of these meetings, right? They'll go down this little rabbit hole, but now you have this like nice visual thing to keep everyone on the same page. Another thing about stakeholders, you can do it at any level of detail. So, really high level for your CEO, maybe a lot lower level for other folks. All right, I think that's all the time we have. We're like 3 minutes to end. Why do they work? There's some story about why they work. There's questions, but I think we'll skip those. Putting it together. So now we would have gone back and looked at that same exercise and tried to refine based on that kind of thing. There's a summary, use them both together. They help you uncover and solve user needs. There's a lot more to learn as well. Yeah, this is a link that take a look if you're interested. This is how you can use jobs to be done even in the context of user acquisition. This is really like if you're at all on the marketing side, there's a really good article called "Finding Language Market Fit" by First Round, which speaks to this as well. So what you're really trying to do is solve some need for them, not provide them a bunch of solutions or features. These are all the links, and yeah, this is.
Any additional questions, team? Just on the user story mapping, I know we had some good discussion in the chat, but yeah, I see we've got one. What are some important KPIs to track to understand whether we've succeeded in creating a product that solves our users' needs?
I mean, just how many times? So it depends on the nature of your business. There's again a really good first round article about this. But let's say you're some kind of SaaS, right? Just focus on what does success for your user look like. Like, let's say I have a flow that leads to. I mean, filing tax is a bad example because it only happens once a year. But let's say, I have some kind of service that helps you pay your monthly credit card bill. So how many are we getting one? Or let's talk about Uber. How many cab rides am I enabling for people? Right, that could be one really good KPI because the whole value is for you to enable a person to get from place A to place B. So how many times were you able to successfully make that happen? Might be a good KPI. You can track it kind of on an individual basis. How many times are we helping this person get to this thing? Is that falling off? Is that going up? Are we completing all of our rides? How many canceled rides do we have? Is potentially a good one. But yeah, in general, yeah, there's this whole thing about outcome impact and output outcome impact. So you want to basically like do KPIs that are important to your user and to your business. So things like how are we helping users is the output one. The impacts one would be how many total users do we have, total kind of revenue. But yeah, just directly measure how you're adding value to the user is normally hard to go wrong.